it's your girl Sherry Lynn, and you're watching Sweep the League on Alamo City Podcast Network.
Hey, this is George Iceman Gervin, and you're listening to Sweep the League.
Happy Good Friday, everybody. It is Easter weekend. It is Sweep the League. Rudy Coppush Jr. will be joined here by Derek Gervin in just a little bit. It's Friday edition. It's Flashback Friday. For everybody that doesn't know about Flashback Friday, this is when we go back into the vault of NBA lore, football lore, maybe MLB since the season started yesterday. We'll talk about some flashbacks today as well. But, of course, we got to kick everything off with the NCAA March Madness. Unfortunately, my Tar Heels are out at my national championship pick. The Arizona Wildcats are out as well. But also, the biggest subject that I'm going to bring upon, I had a conversation yesterday with a good friend of mine, and Manu Ginobili. A couple of days back, we talked about Steve Nash and Tony Parker, where they ranked and all that. I'm going to throw a curveball for the Manu Ginobili talk because it might surprise a lot of you where I have him ranked and maybe where Derek may have him ranked. So nonetheless, let's get the show started. Let's bring on the man, the myth, the legend himself, the man of Sweep the League here, Derek Gervin. Derek, man, you're coming off of a birthday yesterday, man. How was the birthday?
It was absolutely fantastic, man. I got to give a shout out to this lady here. She cooked. I had a breakfast of champions. I had a lunch of champions, and I definitely had a dinner of champions. I even got some cake made for me that said "Happy Birthday, Derek." So my day was fantastic.
Man, I saw the picture of the cake or the video of the cake, and I haven't had cake in going almost 4 or 5 years. I miss cake, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to see that picture.
That's when we need smell-o-vision, where I can just scratch the screen and so I can smell what kind of cake it is and all that. But nonetheless, man, I'm glad you had a great birthday. Birthdays are fun, man, especially when you get a lot of love, which I know you got definitely a lot of love yesterday on social media and everything.
It was a lot of the people, man, thanked me, and I was sincerely grateful. I didn't know I still had so many friends out there. So, it's all about relationships and seeing that everybody showed me love yesterday. It was kind of surprising, but I embraced it and I love it. And I want to thank every single one of them individually. I appreciate them. And hey, thank you very much for recognizing me.
I know, and don't think I didn't notice the cowboy hat. I don't even own a cowboy hat, and I've lived in San Antonio just about all my life. So,
they used to call my dad Cowboy. So today I'm kind of honoring him.
That's awesome, man. Tim Gonzalez is in here. Thanks, Tim, for showing love as always to the show. I didn't get my Tar Heels suck, I guess, because they lost last night. Tim's going to give me a little bit of a break for today, but he does have a big game tonight with the Duke Blue Devils as they take on the Houston Cougars, man. But first and foremost, Derek, NCAA last night, man. We saw two games that I guess we kind of expected to go that way. And then we saw two games where it really didn't go the way we probably figured it would. So let's jump right into it, man. We're going to start off with the games that actually went the way we figured. UConn defeating San Diego State 82-52. Illinois beating Iowa State. Those are the two teams I had coming out of the East bracket. And the UConn-Illinois game, it's probably going to be one of the better games of the tournament. It's going to be up-paced. It's going to be up-tempo. I'm liking that game. What do you foresee in that UConn-Illinois game?
Wow. Well, for me, I'm going to I pick UConn. I think they've been the best team all year. But as you know, this is why they play the games. And it's usually who gets hot at the right time. Illinois has been playing fantastic basketball. I actually thought Iowa State would be able to pull that game out, but Illinois stuck true to who they are. They've been very resilient all year, and I'm going to pick UConn. But I tell you, Rudy, it's going to be a really good game. And as you know, a lot of these games at this point in the season, there are a lot of ebbs and flows, and it's who can withstand the things that don't go their way. But either overall, I like Danny Hurley as a coach. I believe in him. And as you know, his family is very known. They're legends in the game of basketball when it comes to coaching and playing, actually. But I'm going to give UConn a slight edge. I think it's going to be a closer game than people think. But, yeah, I'm going to go with UConn.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm taking Illinois. You saw last night against Iowa State. I mean, once they get going, shooting that ball, the guard play, it's very hard for them to stop. But I'm not gonna say it's gonna be a dominating performance or anything like that. But I can see UConn even pulling out the win over Illinois. UConn just looks good, but doesn't it feel like UConn has that? Like there's got to be some kind of hiccup somewhere on this tournament for UConn. It always happens, and that's where the resilience. That's where the pressure comes in, and you have to be able to handle that pressure. It's got to be coming at some point for UConn, you would think.
I believe I don't like a lot of times you see teams that breeze through the tournament and they're never really tested. So yeah, I understand you clearly. That kind of makes me nervous because sometimes when you cruise into 30-point wins, you might start thinking that you're actually playing better than you really are, and your confidence can grow to the point where it could become a negative thing. But I think them being the champions, even though they lost a few players last season, I still think that's where Danny Hurley comes in, and I believe he's the type coach that can keep them level-headed. And I just think they're going to take away some of those shots that Illinois was getting the last game. I think they have guys that can move their feet, and we know they rebound the basketball. So I just think UConn is a better team.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the better games, I think, in the tournament. I really am looking forward to UConn, Illinois. Let's go to the West bracket. The West is not the best. It's the bracket that busted a whole bunch of people's brackets even more. Killed my bracket, broke my heart because my national championship winning team, Arizona, got bounced by Clemson 77-72. So I figured, you know what? Arizona goes down, Derek. I'm a Tar Heel fan, always have been, always will be. I'm going to give the edge to Carolina to win the national title this year. Lo and behold, Alabama and a guy that I talked about back when he was with North Dakota State and Grant Nelson came up huge last night. And I remember talking to a couple of guys who are NBA prospect guys, like they cover the NBA draft. And I told them, Grant Nelson is big. He's big time. He's just not playing for a big time school at the time at North Dakota State. They said, he's probably second rounder. This guy's playing his way into the first round if he continues to play the way he is for Alabama. Nonetheless, give me the takeaways you had for Clemson, Arizona, because that was a collapse. And give me the takeaways you had for Carolina and Bama.
Man, there are just certain teams. Every year they play well all through the season. They basically cruise through the season. But then come tournament time, it's just their weaknesses become exploited. And Arizona, to me, is one of those teams. We've seen it ever since Lute Olson left. They brought in Sean Miller. Now I believe they have Tommy Lloyd. And it's just Arizona. I don't understand it. They're a really good team every year. Basically, they're a top 4 team over the course of the regular season. But then they come up short come playoff time, and it's kind of disconcerting for me because sometimes you have these high hopes for certain teams.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of disappointed because I had Arizona going to the Final Four. I refuse to give in to my feelings. I said I know every year they seem to come up short. So I still said this time, I just think they're going to break through. And lo and behold, what happens, man? I mean, Clemson went out and they played hard, and we talked about resiliency already. Clemson is playing. I don't know who's playing better, Clemson or Alabama at this time. So both of those teams they were not really coveted during the season. Nobody really talked about Alabama during the season and Mr. Nelson. Nobody really talked about Clemson during the season. So that's going to be an interesting game, but I'm going to take Clemson in a barn burner, a game that I think goes down to the last couple possessions.
Yeah, and my thing with Alabama was we saw the most physical game, and I tell a lot of people I was so giddy and excited to see that Bama Grand Canyon game where the refs basically just swallowed the whistle and said, "Let's play ball." And you saw a lot of the players, Derek, you saw all the players from both teams looking at the refs with the where's the foul? Where's the foul? And
Yeah.
it just seems like the refs were like, you know what? Do you see any blood? No. Okay, no foul. No foul.
You
I'm
know,
not going to call it.
with Alabama, Rudy, I really think that North Carolina more so gave the game away. I don't want to discredit Alabama, okay?
Mhm.
But I think if you remember, I think they had a chance to put the game away. Baycott missed a big dunk.
Yeah.
And from that point on, the momentum swung. If you remember, right after that, Alabama came down and hit back-to-back three-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's where the game changed. And these young people out here, man, I hope they're listening. They need to understand when you're playing a one-game knockout, it's about getting the basket, man. It's not trying to entertain the crowd and all that. I don't know why you talk. I know he was all American, but why do you feel at that point in the game you got to hang on the rim and all that stuff? Just drop the ball in the basket. The name of this game is win and advance. And I think Alabama played well. We know Mr. Nelson played well. He knocked down his free throws at the end. But I think North Carolina really contributed to losing that game.
Yeah, and especially when RJ Davis, he picked a hell of a night to have one of his worst games. 0 for 9 from 3-point range, 4 for 20 from the field, 16 points. Just didn't get the performance you would expect from RJ
Rudy,
Davis on
they
this
put
kind of
pressure
stage.
on him when he was driving to that basket, though. You know, they were kind of clogging
Mhm.
in the lane a little bit and getting physical with him. They weren't giving him space to shoot floaters and all that. So a
Yeah.
lot of his drives to the basket were contested. But I'll tell you what, man, that was one of the best games of the tournament, if not the best. I thought it was fantastic. The physicality reminded me of old school basketball, and,
Mhm.
and, and I was loving every minute of it.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at with that Grand Canyon Bama game. You saw the physicality of 80s basketball. They just let them play. And I think a game like that is what prepared Bama for North Carolina because you saw the same type of physical battle. And I'm thinking, wow, this Bama team is getting tested. Could they possibly be a Final Four team? I kind of like their chances against Clemson because not only have they conquered, the mountaintop in North Carolina, but they've been able to overcome the physicality of the play, which to me makes your toughness level go from here to here. And that's something you really need because it also helps with the mental game going into the Final Four. If you're doing, if I'm reading that right, because you're next up, you have UConn.
Only question I would have is when you talk about game planning. You know, a lot of these teams they're not going to let certain people beat them. And I think there's going to be a good game plan for Alabama for Mr. Nelson. Nelson, man, you know he kind of remind me of, but we talk about him in high school. Cooper Flag.
Yeah.
Nelson is not as strong as Cooper, I'll say, or maybe not as quite as athletic. But man, the guy can play. He's got some stuff in his bag. And yesterday was his coming out party, even though a lot of people have already been familiar with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think Clemson's going to have a good game plan, and I think they're going to make someone else beat them other than him. And but I'm not going to discount Alabama at all because they seem to be playing really good basketball and they've been consistent.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson's coming out party is going to be good. I think I'm going to lean towards Alabama beating Clemson, and I've got Illinois beating UConn. But like I said, that's going to kind of be a game where it's going to be a great game between UConn and Illinois. Either way, Bama against Illinois or UConn, I can't rule out Alabama beating one of those
Rudy, I'm
two
gonna tell you
teams.
why I give Alabama such a good chance. I'm not saying I still don't know. I'll tell you this: if Alabama gets up and down the floor, to me, that's how you beat a team like Clemson.
Yeah.
Some of these teams, they play the same way every year. The Dukes, the Kentucky, you know what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get them out of their comfort zone, some teams don't play well when they're coming from behind. And I believe Clemson is one of those teams. If you can put up enough points and make them start taking quick shots and things like that, then that's one way I think that you could beat them. But I'm going to give Clemson a little edge, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Alabama take over that game.
Yeah, I'm fully expecting Bama to take over that game. This is Sweep the League. This is Derek Irvin, Rudy Campos Jr., all part of the Alamo City Podcast Network. Let's go to the South, Derek. Now the Houston Duke game. I kind of talked to yesterday. I had Jared Zeidman. He's kind of a trainer. Basically, he helps high school kids get ready for college, gives them the ins and outs. does a lot of, the basketball physical work with them, but also the mental game stuff. He's somebody I really want you to talk to at one point as well. Jared's a really good guy. And I was talking to him about Houston and Duke. It's like Houston hasn't been that great team that they were projected to be. And it's almost like, to me, it's weird because you say it's a trap game in some cases, but we know how good Duke can be. And we know Filipkowski and a lot of the players, how they can just turn it up. This has to be one of those games where Houston has to really focus on the Blue Devils, because if not, it could get out of hand really quick.
Man, I'm just wondering. I wonder about Houston. They're one of those teams I was talking about that's similar to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Every year you expect them to go to the Final Four, and then they come up short. So this year, Calvin Sampson's put together a good squad once again. We know they've had some really good games, but as you know, Texas A&M really tested them.
Yes.
And I think with Texas A&M, they kind of expose some weaknesses in Houston. And if any teams are going to expose weaknesses, it's a team like Duke. So I think that's going to be a really good game. I'm just wondering, can Duke put up enough points? I believe that Houston doesn't have to always score 100 points. I still think if they can score 80, that they could beat Duke. The question is, will Duke kind of slow the game down and run their plays and take time off the shot clock? And if they can do that, if they can kind of control the flow of the game, then I could see Duke, taking those last second shots, Rudy, where you kick it inside or you kick it back out for the open three, but you continue to keep the game at a certain pace. That's how you beat the Houston Cougars. And I think that's going to be another good game. I'm going to pick Houston, but I've seen Duke pull these games off so many times.
I know. Unfortunately, I've got to give credit where credit is due when it comes to Duke, man. But this kind of seems familiar to Purdue basketball this year, how Zach Edey tends to just dominate, and that kind of just gets Purdue going. I see that with Duke as well, as like you mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned it, was the fact that slowing the game down against Houston, it almost rattles them because they're so fast paced of a team. It's the run and gun type of offense that Houston wants to run. So the smart thing for Duke is, like you said, and what I'm reiterating, is if they slow the game down, it'll really make it tough for Houston.
You know who Houston is in the NBA, Rudy, who they kind of remind me of?
Who's that?
The Clippers.
Yeah.
if you make it an ugly game and you really put some pressure on them, they start making just uncharacteristic mistakes. They get sloppy with the ball because it's a lot of one-on-one. And I could see Duke making them put the ball on the floor and, cover and closing out on guys, running them off the three-point line. Mm-hmm. I could see Duke making it a very tight game, but I'm gonna give them a little edge over Duke. I'm gonna go ahead and go with the Houston Cougars. I want to see Calvin Sampson finally take that next leap.
I would almost have to take Houston just because of it's my heart and my mind tells me that I can't ever take a Duke team to beat, but for media purposes, for these purposes, I'm actually giving the edge of Duke a little bit. I think they're going to be a little bit more physical with Houston. They're going to kind of bump Houston around. Some stuff, it's similar because Houston really hasn't had a team like Duke yet, and A&M was pretty physical. I mean, they really played them hard. And if there's one thing as a coach that you and I know, is that when you see weaknesses in a team, you exploit them when you play them. And I think that's exactly what Shire's going to do with Duke and Houston.
Well, Duke's going to crash those boards too. And it's going to a lot of games come down to who's getting the loose balls. And I think that's what's been pretty much Duke all season. They don't have the talent that we're used to.
Yeah.
But they still have a winning tradition. And sometimes that's because of the style of play. Mm-hmm. And I think their style of play could give Houston problems. And if they can start out, to me, if you're looking at the first half, if that game is tight going into the halftime, and you say you got a 2 to 3 point game, then I would probably favor Duke in the second half, because then I think it comes down to possession after possession. And the team that gets the most shots, sometimes, Rudy, a turnover here, a turnover there can affect you.
Oh, and yeah,
definitely. I would expect that more from Houston than I would from Duke. So I would say that Houston wins, but they have to basically kind of smack Duke around in the first half. And if they don't take the life out of Duke in the first half, man, hey, I'll leave it at that.
I was just gonna say that if Duke is up, obviously in the first half, and they go into halftime with the lead, I expect them to keep it. But if they are down by no more than 7, then I fully expect Duke to pull it out in the second
Well,
half.
you're describing Houston. They're front runners.
Yeah.
And that's what I think they are. I don't think they respond to adversity very well. They're one of those teams that if they get out in the lead, then they have a tendency to get away from teams and extend the lead. But if they have a team that's fighting them tooth and nail, then they have a tendency to give in a little bit. And that's what we're going to be looking at tomorrow. The first half will tell a whole lot.
Yeah, and that game actually is tonight at 8:30.
Yeah, tonight. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
No, you're perfectly fine. First game to kick it off is going to be NC State Marquette. You know what? I love Shaka Smart, man.
Yeah.
I mean, coaching wise, I almost would say Marquette should be a blowout in this game over NC State, but I cannot count out the Wolfpack, man. You think like they're gonna lose, but they don't lose, and it's like, what's going on here?
What's the big fella's name from North Carolina State? The big left-handed, is it Brown or something? What is the big guy's name with the braids?
Let me get it for you, man. I got to get it for you here.
You definitely know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Is it Home or Diarra? Diarra.
Yeah,
I got to get the name. DJ. No, not DJ Horn. He's a guard. Go ahead and grab him. I'll get you the guy here in a second.
That guy is strong, man. And Marquette's going to have to contend with that inside game. So it's going to be a tough one. North Carolina State has been winning by playing in the trenches. And the big fella's been delivering under that basket. And so I picked Marquette to win this game. But the more I think about it, North Carolina State has been on the roll. And I'm more impressed with them when they won that 5 games in 5 days.
Yeah.
And after that point, I expected them at some point to run out of gas. DJ Burns. Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, Burns,
yeah. So this is going to be a tough one. I love Shaka Smart, but I've seen him come up short as well, like at Texas. And that's one of the reasons he's at Marquette. So this is going to be another nail biter. And for some reason, Rudy, I don't know, man. I picked Marquette, but I think North Carolina State is so much better than a number 11 seed, man.
I'm going to tell you why you picked Marquette. And it's the same reason why I picked Marquette is because what we mentioned, the run NC State had in the ACC tournament. You figured by now these kids got to be tired, man. The mentality, the physicality, they're just not getting tired, Derek. It's something in the secret juice that they're drinking in North
You know what team they remind me of?
Who's that?
Rest in peace. 1983, North Carolina State Tar Heels. North Carolina State Wolfpack. Derek Wittenberg, those guys. Yeah. Jim Valvano. This team kind of reminds me of that team, man. So I've seen some similarities. So that right there makes me know that they're going to be in this game. I'm gonna actually change my pick, man. I think North Carolina State can win in the nail biter, but I just think sometimes it's just that time, Rudy. They do remind me of that team with the Cozell McQueens and those guys and Lorenzo Charles. So I'm gonna go out on the limb and say North Carolina State with the upset.
And it's funny because I love Marquette in this game, but before we got on the show, I started thinking like, man, are we gonna have an all ACC, Elite 8 when it comes to the West bracket, the South bracket? I think I'm going to say a Duke, North Carolina State is probably going to happen to go to the Final Four coming out of the South. It's Derek Irvin, Rudy Coppola Jr., Purdue. Final bracket here, Derek, gets underway tonight. Purdue, Gonzaga, and Creighton, Tennessee. One comment I've been making a lot is that Purdue's not the overall number 1 seed yet. To me, they had the easiest bracket, and I didn't understand why. I don't expect them to lose to Gonzaga. Edey is just too dominant. I go through the entire list for this bracket, and there's just no person out there that I see controlling Zach Edey. So I fully expect Purdue to beat Gonzaga. I like Tennessee over Creighton. I think it's going to be a Purdue coming out. What are your thoughts on the Midwest bracket?
Purdue is another one of those teams we talk about that every year you expect Final Four. So now we got Arizona. We got I'm gonna put Purdue in that with Houston and another team. Every year they seem to come up short, right? But if we're looking at it this year, for me, it's already I'm picking Purdue to win this game. I'm a Gonzaga fan. I have been for years. I have a lot of respect for Mark Few. I think he's a guy that makes a lot of adjustments, but I think sometimes, Rudy, you're just outmanned, and there's only so many adjustments that you can make. And I think a lot of their guys are going to possibly get it. Well, let me say this first before I go into the foul trouble. It also depends on how the referees let this game, how they call the game. Because I have to say this, I think over the course of the year, I think Zach Edey has made a lot of fouls, I'll say, but the calls went the other way. A lot of charging fouls.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes, it depends on the referee. Sometimes they reward size, and then sometimes they penalize the size. But this time I'm going to go with Purdue. I feel very confident that they could get to the finals. So I'm going to take Purdue, as much as I hate to say it, because I love the Zags.
Yeah, I like Gonzaga. And it almost has to be, if you're Gonzaga, or I mean any team in general, Derek, if I'm a coach going up against Purdue, this is where those, hour and a half practices of nothing but conditioning come into play for me, because the only way I see beating Purdue is you have to move. It's a motion offense. Keep the big man moving, keep their guards moving. When you have a chance to run on the break, just get on the break. Don't allow Zach to get back in the defensive position where he can clog the lane or anything like that. You just got to keep moving. But I don't see Gonzaga having enough in the tank to keep it moving like that.
Boilermakers, your coach, what team did your coach play for? Your coach is a Purdue legend.
Keith
Edmondson.
Yeah. I've always said, man, I don't know if Keith likes me. So we still got to figure that out.
Hey, Rudy, can I answer this question for Tim?
Yeah, let me go back to it. Go ahead, man.
I would say if I was playing point guard for Duke, Tim, I would first of all be a lot of on ball screens, pick and rolls, things like that. I think that's how you beat Houston. Is you have to make Houston move their feet defensively, and I think a lot of times just trying to get in the paint, either taking the floaters or if you can get all the way to the basket, but definitely drawing the defense in where you can get some kickouts and all that. And you take off 25 seconds of possession, man. And I think if they can do that, if they don't get into a run and gun game, I think that's how you beat Duke. Houston, I'm sorry. You make them move their feet and you make them defend. And over the course of the season, there were some games, they running up 100 points on teams, and teams didn't make them defend. And if you don't make them defend, I said they're front runners. So you got a lot of on-ball screens I think would help with beat them. And just taking time off the clock. And I think if Duke can do that and they can stay disciplined, that's how you beat the Houston Cougars.
Am I crazy to think that if you're playing against Houston and you say Duke, for example, this is where the old Princeton offense comes in? A lot of screens, a lot of backdoor screens, because it's no disrespect to Sampson because he's a fantastic coach. I love the guy, but I don't think his players are capable of making the adjustment when it comes to having off the ball screens, on ball screens, backdoor cuts. I don't see them being focused.
They're not that disciplined, Rudy. You hit it on the head. You hit it on the head. A Pete Carril system will give a team like Houston, that the team they had today, a Pete Carril system, it will give them trouble. Yeah. And I still think when you're looking at it today, a team like that, they're going to be playing. It's going to be a tough game. Houston, man, I like them. At one point they were number one in the country. They were the number one seed. But when I watched them play that last game of the season, I believe it was Iowa State that kicked their butt twice.
Yeah.
I saw some weaknesses, man. I think they were kind of exposed. So if any team's going to expose your weaknesses, it's a Duke Blue Devil. So it's going to be a heck of a game. I'm going to still give Houston a slight edge, but like I said, it's going to halftime will tell me everything. What happens going into halftime?
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be another great night of college basketball. After this weekend, we'll have our Final Four, which means next week we'll be talking about the Final Four in NCAA March Madness. This is Derek Irvin, Rudy Campos Jr. We're going to take a little break. When we get back, Manu Ginobili talk, Derek, because I I I didn't get into an argument per se, but I got into a nice little conversation on Manu Ginobili because apparently people were pissed he wasn't in the top 75 of NBA players, but I don't think he's a top 75 NBA player. Hold that thought. When we get back, it's Derek Irvin, it's Rudy Campos Jr. This is Sweep the League. We'll be right back.
Locked On Spurs is your daily Spurs podcast, hosted by Jeff Garcia, the lead Spurs writer for Ken's 5 San Antonio. Jeff has a healthy plethora of guests all the time on the Locked On Spurs podcast. You can also follow Jeff on Threads at Jeff G Ken's 5 SA. You can also follow Jeff on Twitter at Jeff G Spurs Zone. So make sure you go ahead and give Jeff a follow not only on Threads and Twitter, but also on YouTube at youtube.com/@Locked On Spurs. This is where you're going to be able to find the replay of the Locked On Spurs podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share.
Yeah, Jeff Garcia, definitely. You want to get all your Spurs content from Jeff Garcia, Locked On Spurs, part of the Locked On Sports Network. Frequently, I'm on a guest on his show, so definitely tune into that. Jeff Garcia out there. So, man, I'm gonna bring him up here right now, and I'm sharing the screen because we're gonna go to the official, unofficial, stat tracker for everything, and that is Wikipedia. So we're bringing up Manu Ginobili here. And, driving home last night, I had a friend of mine call me and we talked about it. And Manu came up and his comment was, Manu's, well, first of all, let me give you a backtrack. I said Manu is more San Antonio lore than anywhere else in the NBA. And by that, I meant just NBA standards. If I'm in Toronto or wherever an NBA team is located at, Manu Ginobili doesn't come up in my head all the time. He's more San Antonio based and more San Antonio hyped than everything. And that's something that again, no disrespect to Manu Ginobili at all. Basketball player wise, one of the best ever played the game. But I also said top 75 in the NBA. I can't put him in the top 75 in the NBA. Just NBA standards. Now, basketball, guy's top 25. Maybe, for me, he's way up there. Basketball in general, he's up there. But NBA standards only, he's not top 75. I had him basically top 90, maybe. But my buddy didn't even have him in the top 100. Where is Manu on the Derek Gervin ranking scale? Because it's so tough. You and I know internationally, this guy's a genius. This guy's one of the best to ever played the game in general of basketball. But when you strictly down to NBA, where does he rank?
Man, that's the tough one because for Manu, he was a great player. A lot of people go off some of his European things as well with Argentina, playing with Luis Scola and Fabricio Alberto and Pepe Sanchez and those guys. Mm-hmm. And then you remember what they did to the USA. But when you're talking NBA, I'm a big Manu fan, okay? But I don't have him top 75 either. I think Manu was a great six man, one of the greatest six men that ever played the game. I think he did a lot of good things, but he also has some deficiencies. And, Greg Popovich had to kind of change the way he did things because Manu had a tendency to get out of control sometimes, and Pop would have to reel him in. I think he was in the right system, playing with Tony Parker and those guys, Tim and all these guys that they played with at the time, the Tiago Splitters, the Obertos, and all those guys. It's not to diminish anything that Manu's done, but I also saw a page, Rudy, where they were ranking the top Spurs, and a lot of times people have a tendency to go by championships and not your individual play. So I saw some plays with some people that actually had him ranked above my brother, and I thought that was absolutely ludicrous considering my brother played 10 years and was a 9-time All-Star, 4-time scoring champion. The fans paid to come and see him. So, that was kind of funny to me. But I think Manu's been a great player. I think a lot of people go more so because he played Kobe Bryant pretty well. And Kobe gave him a lot of respect. And I think for that reason, a lot of people might put him a little higher than he maybe deserves to be. But there's no doubt in my mind that Manu is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But I don't have him top 75, and I don't think he really would belong in the top 75.
So if we're talking ranking wise, is he in the top 100 in the NBA? I mean, that's 25.
That's hard for me to say yes, because I'm going by individual play. There are so many other great guys. You got guys out there like Bernard King and the Alex Englishes. I can go on and on. Guys that had individual careers that were better than what Manu ended up doing. So top 100, if I could say that, but that's not even a certainty to me, because there's a lot of players that didn't get the recognition because they didn't win rings, but they were superstars. And at no point in Manu's San Antonio Spurs career was he a superstar.
Yeah, and that's so hard to think, because it's funny, Derek. It's like you and I have the whole ESP thing going, because last night I made the same comment. Manu wasn't a superstar. He was a star in the league, and he was a fan favorite. And I think it was more, he was considered a superstar because it was fan driven. Does that make sense?
He's a superstar in San Antonio.
Yeah, fan driven, and that's why. And I love it, because I'm sure we're going to get people, upset about the comment. And it's like we both.
Wait, Rudy, I don't mean to cut you off, but what is there to get upset about? To be a star in the NBA, mean you did it at the highest level. Mm-hmm. And people that really pay attention, that includes some of the Manu fans, they know he was not a superstar. Mm-hmm. He was not the first option on that team or the second.
Yeah.
It was Tim and Tony were the first two options. What Manu did was he brought that extra energy to them when they brought him in the game. But it was not much different than guys like Michael Cooper. When you brought them off the bench as 6 men, he did something great. He did a lot of different things. He had a lot of intangibles. But Manu was a star, not a superstar. And if they don't believe it, all they got to do is do their research.
Yeah, and that's where I said he's a star. He's a superstar in fans' eyes. San Antonio wise, he's a superstar. I mean, internationally, the guy is a GOAT. Internationally, he's one of the GOATs internationally in basketball, period. But on NBA terms, he's a star. He's always going to be a star, and that's no disrespect. The guy, if not for him, I still don't think the Spurs win the title against Detroit. I mean, he was the main focal point, in my opinion, for them winning the Detroit title. But in every title the Spurs have won that he's been a part of, he's played a massive role in each one.
Rudy, who do you ever know been a superstar and the average about 14 points a game, 14, 15 points a game over their career?
Jason Kidd? Close? I mean, what, averages 16?
But you know why? You know why Jason Kidd? Where does Jason Kidd rank in assists?
That's the other thing. That's where he does rank.
Yeah, so Jason Kidd, and also steals and all of that stuff. And once again, it's not to slight Manu. I'm a big Manu fan.
Everybody.
He's my favorite player behind my brother here at the guard spot. I mean, man, I'm a remember. I know James Silas, and I've been around for a long time. And so for me to put Manu over him and JC, you might say he's a superstar, and I can't argue that. But I played this game for a living. And NBA, he's not a superstar. But if you feel that way, I'm not going to try to change your mind.
No, and that's the thing. It's more, I mean, we're going to call a spade, and it's fan driven. That's what I was telling my buddy last night. I said, it's the lore of Manu, the everything you hear about Manu, it's been fan driven. And that's where, because it came up also because of a guy on Twitter DM me asking where I think Manu Ginobili ranked in the NBA all time. And I said, I think he's top 90. I can make a small case for top 90 for me. But that's where I would personally have him. I don't know if he's top 100 in most people's list. I don't know. But then he says, well, how do you figure that if he's got 4 NBA titles? He's got this. He's one of the best six man of all time. I said, these are all great points, but I go back to the same thing that you and I talked about the other day with Gio when it comes to Steve Nash and Tony Parker.
But don't even say Tony. Let's make it more simple. Maybe they get an understanding. Okay, yeah. Tony's got championships, right? Mm-hmm. So what next? Tony was better than Magic Johnson. I mean, stop it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're going by titles,
you can't base everything off of rings because that's a team award. Mm-hmm. That is not an individual award. I'm glad to see the Spurs get 5 championships. But as we know, when you hear them talk about the history of the NBA, what's the guy you hear them talk about from that era that played for the Spurs? His name is Tim Duncan.
Yeah, Tim Duncan.
You hear Tim in the conversations as a top 10 player. Some even have him top 5. Not one time have you heard Tony Parker or Manu Ginobili in that conversation, and you won't hear them in that conversation. But once again, that doesn't make them bad players. It doesn't slight what they did. They had great camaraderie as a team, but you got to be honest about it. If you study the game, you would know that what a superstar, the difference between a superstar and a star. And I've been around this game all my life. I love Manu, and I love what Tony did. But Manu is not a top 75 player, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and let me go through the list here because I actually have the list on ESPN standards. Basically, they're the ones that came out with a top 75 list. I mean, you're going through the list. Obviously, Jabbar. The argument against Ray Allen was, again, 18.9 points per game. But could you argue Manu and Ray Allen? It's
Rudy. Ray Allen was putting up 26 a game.
Yeah.
Okay. Ray Allen led an organization. You remember Ray Allen played in Seattle, and Ray Allen also was in Milwaukee. Yeah. Ray Allen ended up sacrificing as his career went on, kind of like Andre Iguodala. Iguodala was headed towards Hall of Fame for me. And then he had to sacrifice. And sometimes that happens. But Ray Allen actually led a team. And that's not to slight Manu. I hope everybody's hearing it. I know they have the San Antonio love for these guys. But it is what it is. My brother is one of the greatest players ever played here, but I don't have him over Michael Jordan and a few of those guys when it comes down to the guard spot because they did it on both ends more so than George did. And I'm not blind. I won't lie about that, even though he's my brother.
Yeah, I get it, man. I get it. People can say, well, what about Carmelo Anthony? Yeah. But Carmelo, again, he was a leader of a team. He led his Denver Nugget squad. He was a man in the New York Knicks uniform for a while there. There's a lot of guys, and I've even heard people try to come at me about, I'm going to throw this name out there, Paul Arizin. I like, well, why is he on? I mean, this is the history of the league. You can't go beyond, the eras and all that stuff.
Rudy, can I say this? And I hope people don't get offended because I know I've been here since 1982, okay?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Fans have a tendency to be biased when you can speak the language.
Yeah.
Okay. And Manu's come over here, and a lot of people they love what he's done because of that. But if you go by actual play on the court, he's made some great plays, but not top 75 all time when you're talking about NBA history.
Yeah.
How many all NBA teams did he make, Rudy? Tell you the people that think he's top 75 to go look and see how many all NBA teams he made.
He's made
third team?
Two-time third team.
Yeah. Third team. Okay.
It was 2 times. So
2-time third team. That's not Hall of Fame. That's not it's Hall of Fame. That's not top 75.
Yeah, and people fail to realize, man, that's it. I always have that same argument too when they say this guy's not Hall of Fame worthy. I said, no, hold on. The Naismith Hall of Fame is one word. It's basketball. So just because I didn't have a great NBA career doesn't mean that they're going to overlook my YMCA career. I mean, I was a man in YMCA. That's Hall of Fame worthy. Why? Because it's basketball. You're fine. It's basketball. It's whatever you've done in the game of basketball gets you into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Now, you have the NFL Hall of Fame. You have the MLB Hall of Fame. There is no NBA Hall of Fame. People got to remember that. People got to realize that. When people have said, well, what is a guy like, Oscar Schmidt doing Hall of Fame bound or all that? Well, internationally, the guy, was damn near Michael Jordan, or anything like that. So, I mean, it's basketball Hall of Fame, Derek.
People just got to realize neither one of us are enemies of Manu Ginobili. We both think he's a great player. I don't think the Spurs would have all those championships they have without him. But when you talk top 75, I think people have to broaden their mind a little bit. When you start talking top 75, that didn't start in 2000, the year 2000. That started in the 1960s until now. And I think so you're talking about over 60 years. And I think people have to factor that in when they start talking about top 75 players.
Yeah, it is, man. You got a great list of guys here. Obviously, a lot of history, going all the way back to the original big man in George Mikan when he played for the Minneapolis Lakers. There's a guy right there, Steve Nash. I mean, there's another part. If you're gonna call him better than, Tony Parker better than Steve Nash, Parker didn't even make the 75 list. So again, it's hard to argue, stats and accomplishments like that. There's really, for me, I said, top 90. I can make the top 90 case. We don't know if he's really top 100. Manu falls wherever Manu falls, but in San Antonio history, Manu's definitely in the top 6, I would say, top 7 of Spurs. Tim, David, George are the first 3 guys. You could put them.
Sean Elliott.
Elliott's another one. Alvin Robertson, who never gets a lot of love.
Alvin, right. Those exactly. Alvin, as we know, still has the record for steals in one year. 3.67 steals a game, 301 steals overall. So you got guys in there. It's not just Manu. You have a lot of guys, James Silas, who ended up getting injured in the NBA, but had a stellar ABA career. So you got guys here that have done a lot. Okay, David Robinson. The Mike Mitchells, the Larry Keenans. Larry Keenan averaged 21 points and 10 rebounds over a 5-year period here. And I think sometimes people confuse the longevity, what you did over the course of your career. Sometimes you have a good 4 or 5 years or a great 4 or 5 years, but your career, if it's 15 years, you do have to factor in all the years. And I think that's where Manu comes up short.
Yeah, I think so, man. This is, again, no slight towards Manu at all. We're not even debating whether he was a great player in the NBA. This is not even up for debate. He was a great player when he played the game. He made the plays that needed to be played. You know what? When the Spurs needed that scoring spark, whether Tim was in and out of the lineup or Tim was playing, everybody was there. You had those Manu games where he was putting up 25, 26 in that night, and just making a huge difference. But you also had the Manu games where this is another part where people fail to realize is that it wasn't so much for scoring with Manu. It was the ball movement. It was getting your teammates involved. It was making the little defensive play here and there, the block on James Harden to win that game. Manu is definitely top 10 for me when it comes to doing the little things right in the game of basketball.
Well, we can't leave out also, because for the great plays, sometimes you have to humble people, because there's also the foul on Dirk Nowitzki.
Yes.
That a lot of people want to overlook. Manu did a lot of great things, and he did some not so great things. But if you add it up overall, once again, he's clearly a top 10 Spur all time. And just you and I talking about him being in the top 7, 8, 9, 10, just for the Spurs, Rudy, tells you that he's not a top 75 player. If we were talking about him being in the top 3 Spurs, top 3 or 4 all time, then you'd have a better argument. But when you're talking about a guy being 9, you don't hear them talking about Kobe Bryant and Magic Johnson being number 8, 7, 8, 9, 10. You don't have to question that. You don't hear them talking about Larry Bird being the 7th or 8th, the 9th, 10th best Boston Celtic. You can go on and on down the list from team to team.
Yeah.
And Manu had a great career, but it was not a top 75 NBA career. It was a top 75 overall career, because you factor in him playing with Argentina.
Yeah, and honestly, if it's basketball in general, NBA produced a lot of great players, man. But basketball in general, Manu's no doubt top 75, no doubt top 50. I have to go over the list, but could I put him top 25 just in basketball in general? It's close. I think I could probably make a case for basketball in general, Manu in the top 25. But NBA standards and NBA only, yeah, it's hard to put him in the top 50. This is Derek Irvin Rudy Campos Senior Sweep the League. We come to you every single day, Monday through Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. Quick announcement. So we're going to probably be going on and off here show-wise, and life happens for me. I've got a lot more work coming my way, a little promotion type stuff. So for everybody that thinks, man, Rudy podcasts for a living and makes a living off of that. Actually, I don't. So there's going to be a couple of days where we come up. There may not be a show mainly for that reason as well. But we'll keep everybody ahead on the shows, whether they're going to be one or not. But we got one thing left to do, man, before we go, Derek. It is Flashback Friday, and we always like to open up the vault. And I promise you, we're going to get we're going to video. Joe and Shemaya are working on a video, so we can play it, and it's like flashback, this and this, dream. Well, we're going to open up the vault, man. It's MLB season started yesterday, and we've been talking a little bit about Pete Rose. We've been talking a little bit about the old guys, the Cincinnati Reds, their old red machine, that type of team. We've talked to NFL guys, Barry Sanders back in the day, but I want to open up the NBA vault. And I've been meaning to ask you this for a while, because a lot of people don't know the guy, but a lot of people should look at the guy and see what he accomplished. And I always remember telling you that my dad was a massive fan of this guy, and he's not even a Spurs player. But from the Boston Celtics, people need to go do their research on a guy that won Finals MVP, and that was JoJo White from back in the day. You actually have some ties with George from JoJo White. So love to open up the vault, the NBA vault, and talk about JoJo White from the Boston Celtics, man.
Well, I thought JoJo was a great player, even though he was with Boston. He's one of those guys I think that you could put in any system, and he would have succeeded. The guy could score. He was strong. And he could also pass the ball. I mean, if you look at him, George still talks about him today, and rest in peace to JoJo White. Mm-hmm. Just a fantastic human being, but he contributed to winning. Not a guy that's going to cause waves in the locker room. Whatever you needed him to do. It's kind of like Manu as far as making adjustments, doing what's best for the team. But people need to go back and look at that jump shot, because if you really look at it, he's shooting a one-hand jump shot. Mm-hmm. And I thought JoJo White was a great player. I was a big fan when he was playing during his career. And he played with Dave Collins and all those guys, the John Havliceks. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you play with certain guys like that, you might not get the love that you deserve, because you're surrounded by some guys that have been all-star, perennial all-stars. But if you look at if JoJo White is the type guy, if you needed him to come out, say one of their best players got hurt, Hondo got hurt or something, right? And you needed JoJo to get you 25, 30 points. He was the guy that was capable of doing that. He was also a guy that's going to get you 6, 7 rebounds. Mm-hmm. And as you know, back then, Rudy, the assists are different today. Back then, it was 1 or 2 dribbles, basically, for you to get an assist. Today, it's out of control today. You might take make 5, 6, a guy take 5, 6 dribbles like a Giannis, and they still get a guy a Dame or an assist. So it's a different time. But I wish they would go YouTube, pull up JoJo White's record. The guy was a fantastic basketball player. You can go back from when he played in college all the way through his NBA career. A fantastic player, just didn't get the notoriety that he deserved because he was surrounded by some other great players, but he did win.
Yeah, he's a winner, man. JoJo White, another guy that we recommend you guys go look up. Boston Celtics lore back in the day, man. My dad used to always talk about him. We'd be driving on these long vacation trips, and I'd sit there, ask my dad, hey, Dad, let's play a game here. If you had to draft an NBA team, anybody you ever wanted, who would it be? And his first pick was never Kareem, never Magic, never nobody. It was always JoJo White. And I was like, man, why is it always JoJo White? But hey, you got, when my uncle picked Robert Parrish first a lot of times.
I want you to go, and all the people to go Google JoJo White's son. You'll be surprised when you see his face, because he's been an actor for several years.
Really?
A good actor. Yeah. Go Google his son, and you'll be surprised when you see who his son is. You'll know the face. I guarantee you'll know the face.
While we're talking here, I'm going to actually look that up, because we can possibly show everybody out here who his son is, but are you kidding me? I'm just looking at it like right now. I'll tell you what, before we go on to the next one, man, we'll go ahead and show this right here because I looked up JoJo White's son, and you're right, Brian J. White, right? That's who
Yeah,
we're looking at.
there he is.
Yeah. So the family stone, the game plan, 12 rounds, all I can do about it by myself, good deeds, the cabin in the woods. I'm pretty successful actor, I would have to say there, Derek. So for those of y'all that don't know, you have a little bit of insight here. Brian J. White is the son of JoJo White. Go look up JoJo White. Man, talking to Jared Zeidman yesterday, he was floored that I brought up this name. And I talked to him, I was like, the media-driven stuff, social media has been driving basketball players. So that's the reason why, the attitudes are down. That's why the attitudes are bad. Everybody wants to be, clicks and likes. I said, Jared, the one thing that started it for me was it was media driven, but it wasn't social media driven. Back in the day, there was a guy before LeBron was LeBron. And this is what started the whole media hype to where everybody needs to focus on this player because this is the next big thing. Slam Magazine was that reason why we were able to find out who the next high school guys coming up were and everything. The first person that I remember clearly who Slam drove down our necks and who I bit the 4-leaf clover there and figured this guy was going to be a gem. I brought up one Sebastian Telfair from back in the day. People that don't know Sebastian Telfair, I'm going to say it. He was crowned God before LeBron James was crowned the chosen one. Sebastian Telfair was supposed to come into the league and just be that guy. Jared Zeidman was like, I can't believe you mentioned it. I'm glad you did because that's who I was going to say.
New York legend, man. I mean, come on.
The Sebastian Telfair, man, that was one guy that we failed to mention in a recent show.
It's sad because they used to talk a lot about Stephon Marbury and these guys, but Sebastian kind of reminds me of. Remember how they were hyping Harold Miner?
Yeah,
as being the next Jordan.
Yeah,
Sebastian is another guy. I don't know about better than LeBron because he was so much smaller. I would have more compared him to the guard spot. But if you just go look at Sebastian Telfair, I mean, he could do a little bit of everything. And as you know, sometimes, man, you get in the NBA, you might not get if you're not one of the top 3 or 4 guys that come out. It's all about the system, the team that you go to. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of hurt him somewhat, a little bit. But if you look at him overall, he was a highly touted guy. He was a very good player. He didn't live up to the hype, as they say, but he's still. We're talking about him today, so that alone means that his legacy is secure. And I still rank him as one of the best to ever come out of New York, without question.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt that Bassi can play. There's no doubt in my mind that Telfair can play. I expected I had high hopes for him going to the NBA. That's one of those things, Derek, where not going to college really hurt a player at that time. And if you remember, that was the big high school draft because it was Telfair, it was J.R. Smith, it was Josh Smith, it was Dwight Howard. All these guys were coming in. I can't remember if Robert Swift. I think Robert Swift was in that.
Yeah, you remember Robert Swift.
Robert Swift, man, another guy that was touted as a good player, but nothing happened with him.
Oh, is it Robert or are you talking about Stromile? Which one? Stromile?
No. Okay, Stromile went to LSU. Robert came out of
so
Washington.
Robert then. Okay, yeah, he was another highly touted guy.
Yeah, so I mean, that was the high school draft.
It doesn't always happen, man. You remember Lenny Cook? What was the projections on Lenny Cook?
Lenny Cook was supposed to be the next, big time scorer, come into the league, dominant guy. Didn't even make it in the league, man.
So it doesn't always pan out, but that doesn't take away what they did. And Sebastian, I still remember him. I still think highly of him. I think he had if you look at overall, I still say he had a very good career. And when you play in the NBA, if the people say you had a good career, man, I mean, you've done what most people can never even imagine doing.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, I want to get to Jeff Scrum before we leave here because we got to log off here in a minute. But another guy that I March Madness hype is what we call about players who we figured would be in the NBA and do well. he was way before his time, and it just kind of sucked because he played, I think, with Glenn Robinson and Ray Allen. That was Sean Respert out of Michigan State. I had high
Yeah.
hopes for Sean Respert, man.
So did a lot of people. They thought he was going to be, a lot of people pictured him kind of like an Andrew Toney.
Yeah.
Coming out of Michigan State, a guy that was going to put up 25 points a game in the NBA, and it just didn't pan out. I don't know. Sean had some deficiencies. For me, he wasn't a very good ball handler, and he was only like 6'2", maybe 6'3", if that tall, and I might be stretching it. I'd say it's more like 6'2". But sometimes when you move on to the NBA, Rudy, as you know, you get in guys, you run into bigger, faster, and stronger sometimes. And I just think Sean didn't start off in the right situation. And then, some teams aren't patient enough to give you the opportunity to shine. If you look at today, so you'll have more of a chance to shine because today they draft on projections. Yeah. So they give guys 4 or 5 years to figure it out. Sean came in an era where you didn't have time. They didn't wait on you, give you time to figure it out. So basically, if you were ready, you either were ready or you weren't. And I think that's what ended up hurting him.
Yeah, I think it was he was a little bit before his time. I think in today's game, Sean Respert would have been a really good, valuable player with his shooting capabilities. I figured he would have had a better career than Tracy Murray did, but I was wrong.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that. There's guys, Mateen Cleaves, people thought a lot, was going to do this and do that, and it didn't pan out either. Another Michigan State guy, Cassius Winston, Michigan State guy. Yeah. Sometimes it just doesn't pan out, but it doesn't take away from what the guys have done over the course of their career. It's just the NBA is a tough game.
Yeah, I want to get to Jeff's question because I know we got to go here. The Jonte Porter issue, betting on games that they're still investigating on, does it kill the betting partnerships? Honestly, I really think it should just be out of the game completely. Not as far as betting, but what I'm saying is it's gotten out of hand. I think there's got to be some kind of control to this because now if you're allowing players, if players want to bet, it's accessible to them so easily. They can go into the locker room, get on their phone real quick and make a bet. And, what does that do to the integrity of the game?
And why would this young guy, man, why is he even focused on that? He needs to be trying to get in there and focus on, getting himself a legacy and trying to stay in the league a lot of years. There's certain things you don't do when you come into the league, man. You got to be focused from day after day, just trying to become the best player that you can be. I hope that this doesn't end up going bad for him because I read about it a few days ago. When they first brought it to it, but it hasn't been brought to a head yet because, they still have to do their due diligence and see what really went on. But I don't think it's going to kill. I know for a fact it's not going to kill the betting, but you don't even want to kind of put that out there where people are talking about what you might, and the integrity of the game is what it's about. And that's professional sports, period. So I'm hoping this blows over and nothing serious comes of it, but guys got to make better decisions.
Yeah, real quick, Derek, we're going to take off here, but Tim wants to know real quick, who are your top 5 players all time out of Michigan?
Well, let me show this shirt first, man, Tim. St. Cecilia in Detroit. They talk about Rucker Park, where here's those 5 guys. I'm going to name them. Let me see here. So for me, man, a lot of people that's in Michigan, we know there's my brother, George Gervin. Mm-hmm. There's Spencer Haywood. There's Chris Webber. For me, there's a guy by the name of Ralph Simpson, who was the top player in the country out of Detroit Persian, the same school as Spencer Haywood. And the 5th one to be tough for me, man. So let me see. I got George, and you know who my 5th one is, man. I'm just acting silly. There's a guy by the name of Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
So I got George Gervin, I got Magic Johnson, I got Spencer Haywood, I got Chris Webber, and I have Ralph Simpson. If they don't know who Ralph is, look it up.
And Steve Smith is out of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken.
Steve, yeah, and I bet you. Well, I was with Steve last month.
Yeah,
but guess what school Steve went to?
Off the top of my head, I can't even remember.
Well, I think he's a Persian guy as well.
Yeah, and then don't forget Jalen.
So he knows about guys like Ralph Simpson. So those will be my 5. But I don't. If I'm leaving anyone out, I can the top 5. And then if you're talking about just overall, not counting the NBA, I have to name another guy by the name of Antoine Jobert. They called him the Judge out of Southwestern High School in Detroit. There's no player that's, including Magic, including George and Spencer Haywood, there's no player that was more touted ever coming out of Detroit High School than Antoine Jobert, the Judge. And he actually wished me happy birthday yesterday. So shout out to you, Judge, Antoine Jobert.
Awesome, man. You know, that's actually a good conversation to have. I think next week we'll dive into some old high school basketball, because even in San Antonio, I mean, you had Stanley Bonowitz, Dante Mathis, Robert Bell was another
Tony
guy.
Terrell.
Tony Terrell's another one. You know, Fennis Dembo. You want to go way
my
back?
My buddy, Fennis.
Yeah. So, I mean, even San Antonio, we got to go over some high school stuff, because a lot of these high schoolers, they don't make it to the pros, man, but you cannot forget their legacy.
Hey, Rudy, let me tell the people, if their car might not be working one day and they take the VIA, they might run into one of the bus drivers, and his name is Fennis Dembo.
Fennis Dembo, yeah, actually, that is a fact there, because I have friends that work for VIA, so definitely know Fennis as well. But hey, man, it is Friday. We're going to wish everybody a happy Easter this weekend. We'll keep you updated on the show going forward here, but we should be back on Monday. We're going to talk some high school basketball, because like I said, they may not have made it to the pros, some of these guys, or majority of them, but you can't forget their legacy, man. So for Derek Gervin, Rudy Campos Jr., Coach Gio will be back next week. Hopefully The Rock will be back next week. We got some special guests also lined up. We'll let you guys know about it. But for everybody, hey, man, have a great weekend. Have a happy Easter. We'll see you guys next week.
Rudy, I love you, man. Everybody have a happy holiday. Stay safe out there.
Love you too, man. You be safe. We'll be back next week. Till we see you then. See you later, knuckleheads.